Today on BRStv Investigates, if you adjust down the pump speed during your power outage, will you drastically see longer life from your UPS battery backup? Are larger, heavier, and more expensive UPS battery backups the best options? Are lithium-ion battery packs a viable way to protect your tank? Today we find out. Hi, I'm Randy with this Friday's BRStv Investigates, where we put popular reefing gear, theories, and methods to the test by experimenting on our own tanks, so you don't have to experiment on yours. And in today's experiment, we're circling back to ways that we can protect our tanks and keep our fish and corals alive during a power failure with two tests that should be able to give us a better understanding of how these UPS battery backups work, and more importantly, what we should be looking for when buying one to protect our tank investment. I think many of us have heard that when you're deciding on a battery backup option, you can simply make your choice based on the weight of the UPS, where the heavier it is, the bigger the battery, the longer it's going to last. In almost all cases, heavier weight also means higher price tag. However, in our last UPS battery backup experiment, that didn't seem to be the case, and today we're testing that theory even further thanks to you, the reefing community, who many of you asked us to repeat the test and answer today's first question: will the UPS style battery backups last longer at lower pump speeds and less wattage draw? And should we expect to see similar numbers that the Aquatic battery backup put up? But we didn't just stop there, so in a second test, we plugged our MP10s into a much smaller, lower wattage output and less costly UPS battery backup, as well as a lithium-ion battery pack that has a 100-watt AC power output, so that we could answer our second question today: can we actually get better performance from a cheaper, smaller UPS backups with smaller inverters? Let's find out. Like I mentioned, we have two experiments today, and in the first experiment, we're bringing back our two CyberPower UPS battery backup options to find out how much longer they run in comparison to the initial Investigates test, where instead of drawing a full 18 watts at 100% flow speed, we've tuned them down to operating at just 5 watts, similar to the default battery backup speed that the Vortex have when attached to an Aquatic battery backup. In that first experiment, we saw the larger 1500 volt amp 900 watt UPS battery fail first, lasting only 5¼ hours, followed shortly after by the smaller 900 volt amp 560 watt UPS, which failed within 5¾ hours. So today, let's find out how much longer they'll last when the pumps are drawing over 50% less wattage from the battery. We added a clock to the time lapse this time around, and with the pumps drawing 13 watts less than previous experiment, we see that they surpass the 5, 6, and 7 hour mark, beating their last runtime of over 5 hours. However, right at the 8 hour and 5 minute mark, the larger 900 watt UPS battery finally fails. The test continues into the 10, 11, and 12 hour marks, where finally at almost exactly 13 hours, the 560 watt UPS also dies, but lasting 7½ hours longer than previous tests. Before we get into the second experiment today, I think we can hold the suspense on this first experiment and go ahead and rate our first question: will the UPS style battery backups last longer at lower pump speeds and less wattage draw? And should we expect similar numbers to the Aquatic battery backup? Without a doubt, and with a full 10 out of 10, when we manually turned the Vortex pumps down to just 5 watts, we produced longer run times with our UPS batteries, where we gained over 50% more run time from the 900 watt UPS and more than double at around 125% gain from the battery backup time of the 560 watt UPS. As for the second part of that question, and if we can expect the UPS backups to provide similar run times to the Aquatic battery backup, undoubtedly the UPS batteries came nowhere near the 81 hours of runtime we saw in our last experiment, even with them set to similar wattage draws of around 5 watts. And again, this really demonstrates the efficiency of providing straight DC to DC power from the battery to the pump driver versus the far less efficient conversion of AC to DC, then back to AC power to run the pump. I think it's important to remember that although UPS battery backups are great options for protecting your tank, they're definitely not designed for this purpose, and we can't reasonably expect them to perform the same. The most fascinating result from the first test today is how much longer the smaller, lower wattage output and cheaper 560 watt UPS lasted over the larger 900 watt, which leads us to the second experiment today. We wanted to test our theory that the larger, less efficient inverter on the bigger 900 watt UPS is what causes the reserved battery power to drain much faster than one with a smaller wattage output. It's in that spirit that we looked for a UPS backup with a lower wattage output than the two we'd already tested and found the 255 watt 450 volt amp APC backup for around $60, which comes in at 5¾ pounds. And even more compact and a lower wattage than that, we also tested this 24,000 milliamp hour lithium ion battery with 100 watts AC power output that we picked up from Mophie for about $200. Let's find out how they did. Similar to the previous test, we ran the MP10s at 5 watts or roughly 20% pump speed and then monitored them with a time lapse where we get 2 hours into the experiment and almost exactly at 2.3 hours, the pump connected to the 255 watt UPS fails. Honestly, I was surprised at how quickly the APC UPS seemed to lose its charge, so I removed it from the testing area, turned it back on, and ran the pump again to make sure that the battery was completely wiped, and much to my surprise, it lasted for another roughly 2.5 hours. After a third attempt with similar results, I had to rule this UPS out, as it seems the manufacturer placed a limiter on the runtime where even the packaging quotes up to a 2.3 hour runtime. I have to say that I did have high hopes for this low wattage output battery backup, and I feel that if it didn't turn off prematurely, we would have seen far better results. But the test continued with the lithium ion portable battery, which only has a 100 watt inverter, where we watch it continue to provide power through the 8th, 9th, and 10th hours, where finally at 11¼ hours later, it finally shuts off. So to answer our second question today, can we actually get better performance from cheaper, smaller UPS backups with smaller inverters? As much as I want to give this one a complete 10 out of 10 on the Reef certainty scale, I have to say that the test was actually inconclusive, and we'll need to test again with other low wattage output options that don't turn off. You know, it is obvious to anyone that some UPS battery backup choices are far better than others, and it's important to remember that for aquarium purposes and keeping our tanks alive during a power outage, we're really using these backup sources well outside of their intended purpose, especially with the case of the lithium ion option that had the highest cost and lasted relatively longer than most, yet our model could not keep itself charged and run the MP10 at the same time, meaning that we could only use it if we were home and able to plug it in and turn it on manually. So with that, I don't think we're quite done yet with this experiment. In the next Investigates test, we aim to find the best option using what we've tested so far. However, I'd say for those of you who already have Vortec pumps, just stick to the Ecotech battery backup and know that it's the best option for that specific pump. For the rest of you, keep a watch for our next experiment, but in the meantime, if you want to know how we failed at our own advice during a power outage, you can see that and more in this power outage playlist.